you start to feel that feeling in your gut that this is not good, that feeling of like, man, this just does not feel good, then it's time to really reevaluate where you're at, whether it's an organization, a church, a group. I mean, I've been a part of coaching groups where I started to get that feeling of like, this is a little bit culty. So I made notes on what are the 7 things that make a cult. Hello, hello, my beautiful friends. Thank you for joining me on the 250th episode of Journey of a Fearless Female. I am your host, Paola Rosser, and I have just found out that I've completed my 5th year with this podcast. Right before I hit record, I realized that I launched this podcast back in April of 2019. So just 2 months ago, I hit my 5th year recording episodes, getting guests, launching, publishing, all the things that go with having a podcast. And I've been doing this for 5 years now, and I've published an episode every Monday, and I've booked many guests from all different walks of life. And this has been my pride and joy. I love doing this. I love what I get to do. So, for those of you who are listening to me on Apple Podcasts, make sure you leave a review. It really helps out my podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you so much for listening on Spotify. My numbers go up there, so that's amazing. And if you're watching here on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe. I'm so close to monetizing this channel. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast. But let's get into it. This episode is a solo episode. Let's talk like we're besties because we are at this point, right? We've been friends for 5 years. um, I just recently watched the documentary Dancing with the Devil. And if you don't know what this documentary is about, it's about TikTok dancers who joined a church under the guise that they were going to be able to do what they love, which is make content on TikTok, dancing content on TikTok, and also love God and Jesus. Unfortunately, this church turned into a very cult like environment. And the Fast forward if you don't want to hear all the details because I am going to spill a lot of beans. And if you want to watch the documentary, it's on Netflix. So fast forward this part. Basically, the guy that runs the church, his name is Robert Shin, and he created this way of basically controlling these dancers. Not only was he taking 10% for his church, and I'm doing air quotes for those of you who are not watching on YouTube, but he's also like asking them to donate 10% more for himself because he calls himself the godly man, and then 20% for his management fee and 10% for this. And before you know it, the dancers were basically giving 50 to 60% of their check to the church and the church members. The Robert Shin, who's the person that is like the head of that church, was also asking these dancers to cut all ties with their family, to die to oneself. As I'm listening to this documentary and sitting next to my husband, he's questioning like, how do people just get involved and how do they not leave? And if you have followed me on social media, especially if you follow me on TikTok or even on Instagram, no, maybe I think I only have it on TikTok. On TikTok, I have what are they called? Playlists at the very top of my profile. And I'll put a picture here. But basically, on one of them, it's called The Crazy Story. Because not only have I been a part of a cult when I was in high school, but I recently almost got inducted into yet another cult. See, what happens is that, you know, I think people go into these churches or go into these groups or go into these communities really just wanting to belong, wanting to find other like-minded individuals that they could feel like they belong, they are heard, they're seen, and they finally found their people, right? Another air quotes for those of you who are just listening on Apple or Spotify. Um, because as human beings, that's all we really want. We want to belong. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to feel like we are a part of something. And these people who run churches and cults and, communities, sometimes here's the thing. I want you to understand that we're all human. I don't fault people for what they do. I want people to become aware of why people do the things that they do, right? So, Robert Shin, who is running this cult, obviously he's hurting people. And if you watch the documentary, he's even, SAing people. And he's taking advantage of his power. And I'm sure that his initial intention when he first started this church was not to get to this level, right? But we're human and our devices are going to get the best of us. And if we don't do the inner work, then the shadow work is going to come out. The shadows of our personality is going to come out, and we're going to do things that we shouldn't be doing. And this is exactly what Robert Shin is doing now is he's doing things that he shouldn't be doing. He's taking advantage of people. He's letting the greed consume him. He's letting his, disgusting desires take over, and he's taking advantage of people. And, I understand how somebody can be sucked into something like this because I was sucked into something like that when I was in high school. So now I don't know Miranda's story. I actually don't even, Miranda is the main character, the main person in this documentary. It's the reason why this documentary was made because Miranda and her sister were TikTok dancers and they did a lot of TikTok dances together. And then Miranda went to that church, tried to recruit her sister. Her sister felt a little uncomfortable and didn't go into the church. And then Robert told her to basically stop talking to her family, including her sister. And as I'm watching this, it's like all these red flags are just blaring, right? But I have done a lot of work and I have researched so much about narcissistic behavior and cult like behavior. And just, I've done so much research that it's, for me, I see their blaring red flags, right? I know red flags. And even though I know these things, I still almost walked into another cult. So make sure you watch this crazy story. I'm going to put it right here, the crazy story of the what happened to me just recently. I think it was even just a couple months ago. But what I wanted to talk about is that, like, I see all these videos on TikTok where they're making fun of Miranda for being a part of this. And, as humans, like I said, we just want to belong. We just want to find our community of people. We want to feel like we're a part of the tribe. It's inherently in us, right? We want to be part of the tribe, part of the group, part of the community, and we want to be around like-minded people. And so we go there genuinely seeking comfort and seeking to be a part of something, but then the person that might be running it, maybe a maniacal person, maybe hasn't done any shadow work, maybe is just drunk with power, maybe is, and this goes across all things. Any church, anybody where you're handing over your power to. And it doesn't even have to be a church or a cult or a religion or an organization. It could even be your own husband or your own parent or your own friend. Like the thing is that what happens is that we give away our power. We give away our ability to listen and to trust to our own intuition, our own gut. And so we've been told that we have to find these answers outside of ourselves, which is why we go to church, which is why we go to counseling, we do all these things, which I'm not saying that any of this is bad. I mean, I'm a freaking coach, right? I ask people to come to me and I give them wisdom and knowledge and all that stuff. But like, I also tell them to go within, right? So as I'm watching this documentary, I think back to the time when I went into what was called Church with No Walls. It was a church. My friend Eva had invited at the time, she was my friend. She's no longer my friend, but she invited me to this church, and I desperately wanted to be a part of something. I desperately wanted to find connection. I've my whole life I felt like there was something inherently wrong with me, and I wanted to be loved, and I wanted to be seen, and I wanted to be heard, and I wanted to be a part of something. So when I went to this church, not only did Eva invite me, but she invited my best friend and her boyfriend, and all of us were there. We were doing these like, group Bible studies, and the pastor was so nice. He was like a father figure, everything I ever wanted, right? And I was going all the time, for Bible studies on Wednesdays and on Sundays. I was there at church, and I remember like he wanted me to, like, go up to the front, not just me, but every single one of us, to tell our testimonial, and he wanted us to be graphic about it, and I was like, "Whoa, you're getting to." He wanted to be, basically, he was being pervy. He wanted to know, like, dirty details about my sex life when I was in my 20s, like, now looking back, obviously, hindsight is 2020. Looking back, I'm like, "Oh, that was disgusting. Why did I allow myself to go there?" But see, when you're a part of an organization like a church, like a cult, and they're using fear and shame and anxiety and stress, and um, they really make you believe that if you don't do something, then you're not going to be a part of the group. And as I'm watching the documentary Dancing with the Devil, there he really talks about how, like, oh, if you don't do this, then you're going to hell. If you don't do this, then you'll never walk with God. If you don't do this, then you'll never see heaven. If you don't do this, and it's just like that's the way they use manipulation tactics to keep you there with the shame and the fear and the anxiety that you might go to hell, when in reality you're in your own hell by just being there. But yes, like I said before, I have done so much research. I made notes because I wanted you to see. I have watched the Seduced documentary, which is about the Nexium cult. And that's a whole nother thing. It's like, here is a girl that is a Hollywood star that joined this Nexium cult and was branded, like literally branded with a hot iron so that she could be his basic sex slave on this cult. And it's like, so when you're sitting here criticizing, like, how could you be so stupid? How could you do this? It's not level of education, and it's not your background, because you could easily be like, well, Paley, you were young, you didn't have an education, or you came from a toxic environment, you didn't have parents who loved you. Like this girl that joined the Nexium cult had parents who loved her. She was a Hollywood starlet, and she allowed a man to brand her. There's the other documentary of Going Clear, Scientology. I mean, hello. How many movie stars, people of like high like education background status are part of this Scientology cult? Same thing with The Program. I watched that documentary, and that's these camps that very, very elite people send their children to correct them or to give them, what is it? They're trying to help them be better human beings, or, Paris Hilton was a part of that. Also Heaven's Gate, obviously everyone heard of Heaven's Gate, where everyone had like this big suicide and they drank all the purple juice and blah, blah, blah. They had their Nikes that was run by Marshall and Bonnie. There's another documentary called The Deep End. My friend Cara, she recently posted something from Teal Swan, and I was like, delete that girl, delete that. That girl is like, a little bit crazy. I was like, she's part of this documentary called The Deep End. And if you that's another one that you need to watch. And as you're watching, I was watching the Deep End one because I actually liked a couple of Teal Swan's TikTok. These videos are amazing. She's really coming from a place of blah, blah, blah. But these people that run these kind of things are really good at manipulating you, making you believe that they understand your hurts and your pains. And this is why I tell people, do your research. Do your research. Um, don't just take things because someone said or because you watched a video on TikTok. Dig a little deeper. Dig a little deeper, please. Like, do a little bit more research. Um, and so after watching The Deep End, I stopped liking Teal Swan videos, and I also deleted a lot of them from my TikTok. Same thing with, and it doesn't even have to be around a religion. I just recently watched another documentary about Brandy Hellville, and that's the name of the documentary, but the brand is like Brandy something, and I never even heard of this clothing brand, but apparently it was like this huge thing where women were losing weight and being mean to each other and being catty, and it was a clothing brand. It was a clothing brand that soon became very cult-like. And again, there's another one where there was life coaches, which sucks because I'm in the industry. Two life coaches that said that they were going to show people how to find their true love, and that's the documentary "Escaping Twin Flames," where they were basically telling people that they were matching people up in their groups, and even if they weren't matching, they were telling them you should go get a sex change so that you guys could be a couple, and that's your twin flame. And even as I'm watching that documentary, I understand why people do these things because we're so lost and we're so hurt. And all we want is to be loved, seen, be a part of something. So we want those things so bad that we will go to the extremes to get what we want. And we think that finally, once I get that, then that may fulfill this emptiness that I feel inside of me. And we've all been promised, that once you say the Lord's Prayer, God's going to come in your heart, and then you'll feel better about yourself. You'll finally have, that enlightenment. It doesn't, I'm sorry. And maybe people are going to stop following me because of this, but I said the Lord's Prayer multiple times. I went to church multiple times. I was deep in the church community. Like I was going 3 times a week, women's Bible study, uh, singles Bible study. I was like children's ministry. I was volunteering. I mean, I did the work. I there was a point where I even stopped listening to secular music because I thought it was like ruining my connection to God and source. And I was only reading the Bible and I was not watching television. And I really got deep into this like cult because this pastor really made me believe that if I did these things, then I would get to heaven. And they really use fear and shame, and they really make you feel like you are not good enough and you're a sinner. And if you don't do these things, then you're not going to get the pearly gates of heaven. When in reality, after all my research and all the different, rabbit holes that I've been under and down through and read the books and watched these documentaries, I've realized, which is another really good one that you should watch. What was it called? Let me have to Google this one. Hold on one second. It was about a guy who goes to the islands. He goes to an island to try to teach people about God, and it's these people who are on a remote island that have like never even been touched by humanity. Like they're still hunting on the island with bows and arrows. I forgot what the name of the documentary is. It's called The Mission. It is on, I believe it is on. Um, I guess they're saying it's on National Geographic Channel. It's called The Mission, and it's about this guy named John Chow who thinks it's his duty to go and make these people like worship God and Jesus. And these people um have never even like seen other human beings, like other than their tribe folk. Like anytime someone has tried to go onto their island, they've literally killed them because they're so afraid of outside people. That was the best profound documentary because they interview this other guy who has been all of his life doing missionary work, trying to convert people into Christianity and to believing that Jesus Christ is their savior. And he had the most profound thing to say. He said, I'm basically trying to get people to believe in a monster. Basically, like if you don't believe in Jesus and you're going to hell, that they've never heard of, never existed, and that they're not afraid of. And so it didn't work. And that's the thing. My husband and I have these philosophical conversations all the time. If you can't get someone to feel the fear, the shame, or the guilt of being a so called sinner, then religion isn't going to work for them. Then being afraid of going to hell versus heaven isn't going to be something that you can use to control them. Um, but a lot of people are so afraid of death, so afraid that they may not get the ticket to get to heaven, that they do go through these moments where they give away their power and they seek someone else who supposedly has the answers. So, for example, there's another documentary called Love Has Won, and it's about this woman that basically turned purple or blue. She called herself Mother of God or Mother God, and these people worshiped her. And she turned blue because she was taking mercury and some kind of other stuff. Really good documentary, but it just you watch these people, like, really truly believe that they have a bigger and better connection to God than you do, and that they have downloads and only them could tell what's gonna happen, and these other people truly believe that only through that person can they get to God. As you watch all of these documentaries, it's sad to see that we continue the cycle of not only abuse and shame and guilt and fear, but we continue looking for answers outside of ourselves. You know, I mean, I'm not saying that that I don't believe in God, because I do, but I believe that God is in us, not outside of us, but within us. And I also believe that I don't need someone to give me the direction of where God is. Like, I don't need a pastor, I don't need a church, I don't need a leader. I mean, yeah, I would want to be around people that are like-minded. Um, but when you start to feel that feeling in your gut that this is not good, that feeling of like, man, this just does not feel good, then it's time to really reevaluate where you're at, whether it's an organization, a church, a group. I mean, I've been a part of coaching groups where I started to get that feeling of like, this is a little bit culty. So I made notes on what are the 7 things that make a cult. Okay. So, number one, thank you, ChatGPT, for this. There's always some charismatic leader, and the charismatic leader lacks accountability. Like, they don't believe that they need to be held accountable for their actions or for what's going on. And that was one thing that was a huge red flag when I watched the documentary, The Deep End with Teal Swan. There's a poignant part in the movie or in the documentary when one guy asks her, "Who is your coach? Who is your mentor? Who is it, the person that you look up to?" And she was like, "Nobody. I'm the highest of the high. I am literally next to God. I am God." Like, I was like, "What? This lady is a nutcase." Because, even Tony Robbins, even Oprah, like, they all have mentors. Kobe Bryant had mentors. Like, for her to say that she doesn't need a mentor and that she has no accountability, nobody to give her checks and balances, to really like put her ego into check. Oh, that's a huge red flag. Huge, huge red flag. Same thing with the Dancing with the Devil documentary. Robert Shin has nobody to keep him accountable. In the documentary, women were coming up into the church and saying, "This man sexually abused me." And instead of people holding him accountable and removing him from power, they just allowed this type of behavior as long as he apologized for it. Yeah. So, number 2 is manipulative practices. So, like I said earlier in the podcast, they will use manipulated tactics like fear, shame, guilt tripping you, isolating you, making you feel like you're a sinner. There's something wrong with you. You need this. You need to give me my 10%. You need to give me this money. You need to volunteer. You need to work all hours of the night. These types of cults, these types of groups, organizations, communities, they thrive on deceptive recruiting practices. They withhold key information, they use mind control techniques. A lot of people, have you ever read the book? What's the book called? I can't even remember. something about 40, I think it's like the 40 principles or the 40 laws. Like, I think that book is even banned in most prisons because they teach you how to brainwash other people to do things for you. This book literally teaches you how to brainwash other people to do things for you. And so a lot of people in these groups, these types of cults use manipulative practices like mind control and deception. Number 3, they try to make it seem like they're an exclusive group and only they are the certain people that are going to either go to heaven, or they're the only ones that have the answers, or they're the only ones that are going to be saved, or they're the only ones with the keys to the pearly gates of heaven. And so this type of exclusivity will make you isolate from other people. And oh my God, I almost did this too, because there was a time where I was really like brainwashed to believe that only this church was going to go to heaven. I mean, the pastor even, I remember one time my sister had invited me to go to Lake Havasu, and my sister's big Christian. She goes to a church, and we were going to go to Lake Havasu for the weekend, and my pastor was like, "Oh, well, you can't go to Lake Havasu. You can't go. Like, you have to be here for Sunday church." And I was like, "It's okay. I'm going to do like Sunday church with my sister out on the boat on the lake." And he's like, "Well, that's not where God is. God's not there. You need to be here. You need to be at church." And I'm like, "Whoa, okay." And then he questioned my sister's Christianity and made me believe that maybe my sister wasn't Christian enough because she was kind of like steering me in the wrong direction and making me feel as if I missed one day of church, it was going to take me off the path of enlightenment. And that was a huge aha moment for me when he started to question my sister's Christianity and her intentions with me. And like, if he was trying to keep me away from my family, that wasn't going to work. And that's exactly what Dancing with the Devil did. Robert Shin told Miranda, "You need to cut off your family. You need to cut off your sister. They don't know what is good for you. I know what is good for you. I know how to get you to heaven. I'm a godly man. You need to stay away from them. They don't know a God, and they're going to lead you down the wrong path. And they're really good at doing this. They really make you believe this so much so that you're like, you're right." And you isolate yourself. And the reason why they use isolation, and this is a narcissistic tactic too, is so that they can control the narrative, so they can be in your ear and tell you what you should believe. And remember, the brain is a supercomputer and it's constantly being programmed. So they learn that if they tell you something in repetition over and over and over, that you'll start to believe it. And so be very careful about being in isolation. I mean, even the Mormon church tells their parishioners or the people that are members of their church to not Google Mormon practices or do not use the internet, because then they're going to basically learn that the Mormon religion is just, that's a whole nother podcast. Anyways, okay, number 4 is exploitation. They love to financially exploit you or labor exploit you. Some people even say that Tony Robbins is a cult because he doesn't pay for his workers to do his events and stuff, financial exploitation. They ask, even in Dancing with the Devil, they show that he asked for 10% of this, 20% of that, 10% here, 10% there. And they always have some sort of reasoning as to why you should pay. I'm also a big fan of the Real Housewives, and one of the housewives in Utah had her own church. Whew, watch those episodes and watch that woman's house and how much luxury and money she has in her house. And yet, people in her church probably do not have what she has. Another thing that was a real eye opening thing for me was when I left the church, was that I was always hearing stories of women who either went through divorce or they lost their job or now they're a single mom. They went back to the church and they asked for money. They asked for a handout. They asked for food. And the church was like, "Sorry, can't do it. Sorry, can't do it." What? Like, you're $1 billion industry. You have no money to give to this woman who is a single mom and has 5 children? Or you don't have any money to give to this woman whose husband just died and she has a baby? Like, it just really it baffles me. It baffles me how much they use, financial exploitation. You should, again, do your research. Research how much the Mormon Church has, how much, Scientology has, how much money they have. I mean, if you watch the Going Clear documentary, Scientology has their own buildings that are just completely empty, and I mean, these are expensive buildings and they're completely empty, and they use them as a write-off and, all these things. And also, ugh, bothers me that churches have, you know, they're exempt from taxes. They're exempt from taxes. So that's a huge reason why a lot of these cults or these churches pop up, because they can easily hide money and they can just call it part of their religious practices. I'm using so many air quotes. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the air quotes. If you're listening to me on Spotify and Apple, you're not getting the the air quotes. Number five, absolute doctrine. They believe that their rigid beliefs are that, you know, this group has this religious rigid beliefs. It doesn't even have to be religious. It could be their own doctrine. It could be like, this is what we believe in, and that's what, and no one can question it. No one can alter it. And they believe that this is the ultimate truth beyond reproach. No one can actually question me. This is exactly what it means. And if you don't follow this doctrine, if you don't do the things that this thing tells you to do, then you will be damned to hell, or you will be casted out, or you will be excommunicated. And so, yeah, again, we all as humans just want to be a part of a group, a tribe. We all just want to be loved. And there's a lot of people that refuse to leave, communities, groups. They refuse to leave churches. They refuse to move. They refuse to, I mean, I've even heard something so ridiculous as they didn't want to like leave their credit union because they didn't want to be outside of the group or outside of the tribe, And so, again, a red flag if you have rigid beliefs and infallible doctrine. Number six is aggressive recruitment and love bombing. So there are a lot of communities, a lot of groups, a lot of MLMs that use aggressive recruitment and love bombings. Yes, I said MLMs. Now I'm probably going to lose a lot of friends. I'm probably going to lose a lot of followers, but please do your own research. I'm not saying that all MLMs are like this. I'm just saying that a lot of them use these tactics, and maybe they used them in the past and maybe they don't use them anymore. But I have personally been a part of MLMs like Beachbody, where they use the tactic of, you've got to recruit new members, you've got to get your friends, you've got to get, and then they do the love bombing. As soon as you come into the group, they make it seem like you're the most important person in the whole wide world, and everybody loves you. And for people who have been isolated or have grown up in toxic environments or have never been loved appropriately by their family or their husband or their wife, or they don't have very many friends, love bombing is very enticing. It's so enticing. It is seriously just so alluring. And you want to be a part of the group, you want to be a part of the tribe, you want to have friends, you want to have connection. And so you desperately enjoy the love bombing, and you cling to these groups, these communities, these MLMs, and deep in your heart, deep in your gut, that it's wrong, that it's out of alignment with you, that you're wasting money, that you're wasting time. But then you get on these calls or you meet with the coaches or you meet with the trainers and you're like, this is incredible. They make me feel so amazing. This is why it's so important to learn how to self love and to do the healing. Again, stop looking for outside answers and go within. Number seven, last one, they want to control your daily life. And again, like I said, all of these are so much like a narcissistic relationship. It's so similar to it. And so when these groups, when these leaders, when these communities, when these cults try to control all of your daily life, your daily activities, and I'm telling you, that guy, that pastor was telling me that I shouldn't watch regular television or listen to regular music. He said, "You're poisoning your mind, and you're not getting close to God, and you're not." And I'm just like, "Oh my God, I really believed him." I was in my 20s. I wanted so desperately to be accepted, and so I stopped watching regular TV. I stopped listening to secular music. I only listened to Christian music, and I only watched Christian shows, and I only hung out with my Christian friends. And God, it became really, really rigid and really bad and toxic. And he tried to control my daily life so much so that he was trying to tell me not to hang out with my sister and go to Lake Havasu and be a normal human. So, those are the 7 authoritarian leadership, manipulative practices, exclusivity and isolation, exploitation of either financial or labor, absolute doctrine, um, high pressure recruitment and love bombing, and lastly, control over your daily life. So, these are the red flags. If you have one, two, three, maybe it's time to leave. If you have one, keep an eye out that the others won't emerge. But yeah, anyone, any level of education, any background can be recruited into an environment, a cult like environment. So, as you're watching this episode on YouTube, I highly, highly suggest not to criticize other people because you never know when it could be you. You never know when these people, these groups, these tribes, these cults can get you at a low part of your life, at a vulnerable part of your life, and they grab you and they take you, and you're so brainwashed and so manipulated, and you are drowning that no one is there to help you. I want you to remember, don't feel shame, don't feel guilt. Anyone can be manipulated, anyone can be deceived, anyone can be a victim. I mean, I was a victim. And I have watched a lot of documentaries, and I have read a lot of books, and I have gone through a lot of therapy. I know the red flags, but when you're in it, you can't see clearly, especially if they've isolated you because you're afraid to ask questions. Again, it's the absolute doctrine. You cannot question it. So, yeah. I wanted so badly to talk about this topic because it hurts my heart to see people so desperately wanting answers. And I found the answer in listening to near death experiences. And one of the most profound explanations of what is to come. So, first of all, I'm not afraid of death anymore. No one can use shame and guilt to make me feel like I'm going to go to hell. Um, but second of all, after listening to so many near death experiences and listening to people from all walks of life, including atheists, including people who, are gay and, because the church says that gay people are going to go to hell, like people from, no religion to, Muslim to all the things, right? All walks of life. I've listened to their near death experience, and every single one of them have been enveloped in unconditional love. Now, you cannot fathom what unconditional love is because you have never experienced it here in your world. Never, not on this dimension, have you experienced unconditional love. Now, some of you moms may be like, but I unconditionally love my kid. No, you don't. Because if your kid did something to hurt you, if your kid did something to disappoint you, if your kid did something like, I don't know, kill someone, you would be not love them as much. You won't. Some parents even cut their children off for far less. I've seen it. I've known people that do that. Um, but yeah, we don't know what unconditional love is. And every single person that I've listened to their near death experience say the same thing. I didn't have to earn it. I didn't have to say a certain prayer. I didn't have to be a certain person. I didn't have to do certain things. I just got that love unconditionally, simply because I existed. So, if you're watching this and you're still searching, you're still looking for answers, and you're wondering, but I still feel lost and I still want a community and I still want a tribe and I get that. It's our human nature to want a community, to want to be accepted, to want to feel loved and heard. It's our human nature. I just ask that on your journey to finding your community, your people, and to feeling whole, be careful of cults, groups, religions, MLMs. Be careful because at any point they can get you in your most vulnerable state and they can rob you of time with your loved ones. They could rob you of your finances. They could rob you of just time. Because it made me sad watching that documentary, Dancing with the Devil. Like, that is time that Miranda will not get back with her mom or dad or her sister. Her sister missed her wedding and she'll never get that time back. And that makes me sad. Makes me sad that people are still out there begging someone else to show them the light. Stop. You have the light within you. You can go within and find the light within you. There are good teachers, there are good churches, there are good pastors, but just like there is, it's the law of polarity. Just like there is good, there will always be bad. And this podcast is simply so that you can know and recognize the flags of the bad. So, thank you for listening. Goodbye. Thank you again for listening to Journey of a Fearless Female. I'm your host, Paola Rosser. If you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual mentor, you can book a free discovery call with me at www.fearlessfemale.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at fearlessfemale_coach, subscribe to my YouTube channel at fearlessfemale, or find me on TikTok. I'm under at paola.rosser. And if you love this episode, make sure you hit subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a review. I read every single review, and I truly appreciate the time you spend writing it.